3, 2, 1. Welcome everyone to Color Commentary. We are your pauper commentators, Michael Petchik and Adrian Guarzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Good. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing all right. I can't really complain about anything. But let's take care of our upkeep. We've got an interesting episode queued up for you that hopefully y'all will enjoy. So first off, as every week, we are brought to you in part by Original Magic Art. They provide all sorts of interesting dice bags, tokens, playmats, and art prints from throughout the history of Magic and the history of the world at large. And if you want to spice up your play experience with some pretty things, you can go there. We're an affiliate, so either going to the URL originalmagicart.store/commentary or using the affiliate code commentary in all caps when you check out, we get you 10% off your order. We get a little bit of a kickback, so you're helping the show. You're helping keep the lights on here. You're getting stuff for cheaper. It's a win-win situation. Once again, that is originalmagicart.store/commentary or commentary in all caps, spelled as it is in the name of this podcast. Adrian, what do you have for us?
I'm going to go for a minimalist approach today, Mike. Patreon, $1, listen, pre-show, post-show, patron-exclusive Discord.
I appreciate your large efforts to almost obfuscate the entire purpose of that pitch.
Why say mini word when small word do trick?
All right. I think they got the point, though. I think you managed to minimalize that as much as humanly possible. Finally, we were brought to you in part by Hipsters of the Coast. They're a content hub for all sorts of different Magic content for a variety of formats. So go check them out, read some articles, and if you like what you see, let them know that we're the ones who pointed you their way. Yeah. So that's upkeep. Adrian, what are we talking about today? What pile of cards do we have before us?
Quote unquote mono black.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best name for this deck, because it's not mono black, but it very much is like in the spirit of mono black.
Right. So your friend and mine, Nerd to the Core, Alex Ullman, has been kicking around the idea of playing Dimir Guildmage in mono black. And someone actually 5-0'd, top 8'd. What did they do with this deck?
They were 12th place in the last challenge.
Right. Not Alex, but someone else. And so we decided to talk about it today. Mike, can you explain a little bit why we would run Dimir Guildmage in this deck? And most importantly, what does Dimir Guildmage do?
All right. So Dimir Guildmage is 2 hybrid mana. So you play any combination of a blue and a black mana. So blue, black, or blue-black. You get a 2/2, and it has 2 activated abilities. One is 3 and a black, target player discards a card. Activate this ability only when you could cast a sorcery. And the other one is 3 and a blue, draw a card. Activate this ability only whenever you could cast a sorcery. So, I think that the big thing about this is a way that you have a great mana sink that either, if your opponent is top decking, you can keep them off cards in the future, or if you are top decking and you need more gas, you can start ripping through your library if need be. And the neat thing about this is it also counts, like there's a bunch of stuff that we'll touch on as we go through the rest of this list, but it has a lot of neat little synergies. And I think we actually even talked about this when we did our Ultimate Masters set review.
Right. It's a fun card. It's definitely the spice, as the kids call it these days. Makes your mana base a little bit worse, but we'll talk about that too. It is also, I think, the only guild mage that is a common, and I mean that across all 3 or 4 or however many cycles of guild mages is the only one that you can play in Pauper.
Nope.
I'm not counting the bad ones.
I was gonna say that there's an entire cycle of shard-based guild mages from Mirage. I don't mean those. You absolute.
I don't mean the awful ones. I mean the Ravnica ones.
Okay. Yes, this is the only Ravnica guild mage. And these were cards that a lot of people clamored to be downshifted for years. I've definitely seen this one be bandied about whenever the dreaded downshift discussion comes up. But they put it down to common for Ultimate Masters. So here we are. We have this new toy. Might as well play with it. So this deck really is just mono black control of Yor with a very, very minimal blue splash. So starting off the list, 3 copies of Dimir Guildmage, the quote-unquote namesake of this deck. We then have 3 copies of Kumbaj Witches, the black for 1/3, tap it. It deals 1 damage to a target of your choice and 1 damage to a target of your opponent's choice.
Recently errated to make this less confusing.
Yeah. Though to be fair, we had a discussion on our Discord, and I think it took me like reading the errata 5 times to understand what it actually meant.
More confusing.
There was errata issued to flag bearers and how their abilities work to simplify how Kumbaj Witch's ability works. It's a whole thing. There was a blog post about it on Wizards. Continuing on, though, we have Dusk Legion Zealot, 1 and a black for a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and lose a life.
That's also a relatively new innovation, in my opinion.
Yeah. And when this came out, we talked about it and obviously compared and contrasted with Phyrexian Rager, which is a very similar card. And this deck actually runs 4 copies of Phyrexian Rager as well. So Phyrexian Rager is 2 and a black for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you lose a life, draw a card. That's a lot of card draw there.
Yes, and we'll get in. Yeah, it is. This deck has to keep parity with the blue decks, and it does it with less optimal, more expensive spells, but most of them are creatures. Sorry.
Yeah. So moving on, we have Chittering Rats, which we're gonna go over all these cards because it's been a while since we've talked about some of these things.
Yeah, and it's just to interject here, it's interesting because when you and I first started playing Pauper, this was the best deck.
This was the terror of the format. This thing was like
how on earth am I going to beat Mono Black? And now it's largely faded into obscurity.
Yeah, it's really this is kind of like seeing an old friend who you don't recognize at first. It's just a little bizarre. But Chittering Rats is 1 black for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent puts a card from their hand on top of their library. So kind of time walks your opponent's hand. Do you think this is still all that great? In
Chittering Rats, Pauper Time Walk, you said it. No, I do not think Chittering Rats is good any longer, because living in an era where the best decks are either drawing 1 card a turn, a la the Monarch, or they have the opportunity to not even care via Gush, or they can even shuffle their library since Blue Black Delver must fetch lands. I do not think Chittering Rats is good any longer. There's other problems with it, but its main draw was being able to, like you said, time walk your opponent in a way, deny them an extra resource. If they didn't play a land, brick them a turn. But it's much worse than it used to be, which is maybe why the deck isn't as good as it used to be.
Yeah, because we always used to joke that this is just like the deck of gray ogres with upsides, and hopefully those upsides are good enough. But yeah, I really am not as big a fan as I once was of this, especially like if your opponent has the Monarch established, you're not going to be setting them back as much as you want to.
Right.
Speaking of, 2 copies of Thorn of the Black Rose. So 3 in a black, 1/3 Death Touch. When it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. And we were chatting about this a little bit in the pre-show. Do you think, because you had jokingly said, I hope this isn't a Monarch deck. Do you think this is a Monarch deck?
Yes, I would consider it a Monarch deck. If nothing else, what Mike's main point is if nothing else, it's here to fight the Monarch mechanic. And I mean, I even saw this when I was playing in paper when I went to Japan a year ago. My friend Kevin was playing the Mirror, and he had Thorn of the Black Rose, and his opponent did not. And he drew like 17 additional cards over the course of the game.
Whew. Yeah, like,
and it was the reason he was able to win. It was insane.
Yeah, so it does make a big difference. It also lets you steal the Monarch if you can't get around your opponent's creatures. It does a lot of good in this deck, and you kind of need one of these big game plans if you're gonna put up a serious result. Finally, rounding out our creatures, we have 4 copies of Grey Merchant of Asphodel, Gary himself, 3 black for a 2/4. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses life equal to your devotion to black, and you gain an equal amount of life.
And historically, this is the main reason to play mono black, because Gary's ability is game. The first Gary gets you out of the hole. The second Gary ends the game. So
you can literally just rally 4 of these end on end and just win off that alone if you have no other board presence.
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting.
Yeah, this card was an absolute nightmare in its limited format and crossed over with great success into our format. But yeah, this is the top of curve. This is the game ender. This is the, your opponent needs to go to sleep at some point. Might as well just be slamming a 5-drop that drains them out of the game. All right, so this creature base, are there any other things you'd like to consider for this list?
So the problem with mono black is it's pretty locked in, honestly. You could probably tweak some of the numbers, for Kumbaj Witches instead of 3, depending on your meta. Kumbaj Witches has gone down a lot, in my opinion, also. It was really good against like mono Blue Delver, but it's gotten less and less good.
Do you not like it against, say, like the bully decks?
I think it's too slow.
Okay. I was just thinking with their reasonable amount of like 1/1 tokens.
Yeah, that's why I think it's too slow. You have to tap this twice in order to answer, 1/2 of Battle Screech.
Okay, I can see that. Any other sort of critiques, criticisms, feedback on this creature base?
I'm trying to think of what else this deck used to play. I guess there's no Gurmag Angler, which is kind of interesting. Maybe you don't need it now in the Deemer Guild Mage, the one of the Black Rose world, because that card, historically is very strong. Black never really ran any 1-drops, so not missing anything there. No, I think that the only real innovation to the list, honestly, are the 3 Deemer Guild Mages.
Yeah, it's kind of dicey. There's not a whole ton more you could include. Now, to be fair, we did mention Alex at the top of the show. Alex was not the pilot of this deck, and this is actually not the list Alex proposed in his article. And his does have some of those things. He's got some deep cuts in there. But
who is the pilot of this list?
The pilot of this list was Grant Fly.
Grant Fly, thank you. I want to make sure we got the name out there.
But yeah, like you could run a Crypt Rats or 2, just as a way to handle wiping the board. You could run Fume Spitter as an alternative to the Witches.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of Angler here.
I don't think it works as well in this configuration, because you really want to be spending 5 mana on Deemer Guild Mage, not on Gurmag Angler.
And even if it's like the 1 mana 5/5, this is not like, I don't feel like this deck is the best place to take advantage of that huge body. And I feel like a lot of times it's just going to wind up either being brickwalled by tokens out of a Monarch deck, or it's going to stare off against another Gurmag Angler with blue-black. And assorted other decks have ways to deal with it. So
yeah, Gurmag Angler is not as strong as it was.
I think it's not as strong as it was in this list, particularly. Sure.
It doesn't have a since it's playing so many creatures, there's not really a quick way of ramping it out.
And even besides that, like, I just don't. I was never super stoked on it in the old mono black lists. It always felt like it was trying to attack on a different axis, but like it did sometimes just put away games. I don't know. It's kind of a weird one these days.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to a spell suite here. So 3 copies of Disfigure, 1 black for a instant, target creature is -2/-2.
Yep, good against Delver, good against some Monarch cards. So, yep.
Yeah,
Solid.
like just solid. 4 copies of Chainer's Edict, the 1 in a black sorcery. Target player sacrifices a creature. Flashback for 5 black. It not as good as it once was,
but a staple of the deck.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, depending on the matchup, it's probably better. This makes it so you're not cold to Boggles, for example. But also, I think it is better against Blue-Black Delver than it was against like Mono Blue Delver because the Blue-Black Delver threats are so few.
Yeah, I think so. I think they do still usually run some number of Augur of Bolus, which kind of doubles up as Edict protection, but
that's true.
I see where you're coming from. I don't think it's not something I'd be ashamed to run, right?
Right. It's certainly not as bad as it is against the Monarch list.
Also, by the way, Chainer's Edict now like $1 and change a piece.
Yep. Thanks to the reprint wizards. We needed it.
Yeah. Thanks for reprinting a, what was it, $8 common?
Yeah, it was expensive for a while.
I guess it had only ever seen printing it uncommon, and its reprint did as well. Although I really would have loved if they'd printed it common for no reason other than like being able to run the black set symbol. But that's me being a weirdo.
Dude, you're impossible.
I like it when everything fits. Then we have 1 copy Doomblade, 1 in a black instant, destroy target non-black creature. How do you feel about that?
In this day and age, risky. Sure, it has applications. I like it as a one of, but it's definitely not. I'm just gonna keep coming back to the 2 top decks. It's not as good versus them. Its best target realistically is probably like Delver or Core Skyfisher. You know what I'm saying?
Seeker of the Way, it's not bad against.
Oh yeah, it's really good against Seeker of the Way. That is true. And like I do keep referring to these 2 top decks because just does the decks to beat. Doomblade is good against like random whatever, So
yeah,
it's not awful.
Yeah, there's plenty of decks where it will have leverage against them. Like I like it against elves. If like you happen to run into elves, like being able to get rid of their like specific key pieces is super important, but I'm not thrilled by it.
Right.
We then have 1 copy Echoing Decay, 1 in a black, target creature and all creatures that share a name with it get -2/-2 until end of turn. I think this is good.
Yes, it's good, but it's like the main deck sideboard card,
Yeah, it's definitely. Isn't that kind of where we are at this point? Like, every deck has 1 to 2 main decked sideboard cards, and even then, like Echoing Decay is not the worst main deck. Like, outside of Boggles, is there any deck that this is really just stone cold to?
No, because at its worst, it's just a 1 extra mana for a disfigure.
Yeah, that's kind of my thought on it. Next we have 4 copies of Night's Whisper, 1 in a black for a sorcery, draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. Usually this would be Sign in Blood, but as we discussed, the mana base has to make some considerations for activating the blue ability on Dimir Guildmage. So I think this is probably the right call.
I agree. Because you're playing blue, you lose a lot of the ease with which you can cast Sign in Blood. So traditionally, we've seen lists that are more than just truly mono black run Night's Whisper instead. Honestly, the amount of games you're going to burn out your opponent for the last 2 points of damage or mill them for 2 cards, largely irrelevant. So yeah. Night's Whisper is fine.
Yeah. If you get to one of those situations, you can go, oh shucks, I wish I had the Sign in Blood, but it's just going to be so rare that that's actually the situation you find yourself in. And then rounding out our spells, we have 1 copy of Snuff Out, so 3 in a black for an instant, destroy target non-black creature. You can also instead, if you control a swamp, pay 4 life and cast it without paying its mana cost. So
this sort of falls in the same camp as Doomblade for me. But a little bit better because it's free in this deck. And I think we're living in an era where if you are playing swamps, you basically have to play Snuff Out.
All right, question. Do you think How often do you think that this deck actually just casts this as a 4-mana Doomblade?
I would say not often. Gray Merchant helps make up the life loss.
I don't know, man. This feel like on your 4, like on turn 4, unless you have either 2/2 drops or you have a 3-drop and want to keep up Disfigure, it kind of feels like Snuff Out probably has better odds of being cast in this deck than almost any other deck that runs Snuff Out.
Yeah, I agree with that because I think this deck, like you mentioned, is just getting the higher mana costs on the reg.
Yeah, like it just doesn't have anything that fits nicely into that slot on the curve. So I'd be curious, having not had a chance to try this deck out. Literally, these results got published today. I would be interested to see how specifically that card plays out. I'm willing to bet that it's probably more than 50% of the time, though, it does just get cast for life instead of mana. Rounding out our spells, though, we've got one copy of Oubliette, which I am not going to read the text of. I know I've been doing it for every card. I don't have this one memorized, and I don't want to waste a minute of your life. It's Black Journey to Nowhere.
Yep. It does some extra stuff, but yeah.
We'll say it's Black Journey to Nowhere. Big asterisk. Please go look it up. All right, so this spell base, is there anything else you'd like to see? I'm noticing, like, the first thing that leaps out to me is no unearths.
Yep, Unearth is a card that traditionally got played that return creatures to the battlefield. Would be good in this deck, honestly. Really, only 6 creatures don't get hit by it, and Mono Black's a very creature-heavy deck. So, it's still good, but this deck, all these spells are removal spells and draw spells, so I don't know, where would you make room for that card? Would you cut, like, Doomblade and Snuff Out or something, or would you cut some of the creatures? Or Oubliette even?
I mean, Oubliette is an interesting option to cut. But maybe shaving a Doomblade or a Chainer's Edict somewhere, just to kind of give yourself a little bit of space, because worst case scenario, Unearth does cycle.
Right, and then with Unearth, suddenly your creatures become a lot more resistant to, say, foil.
Yeah, like you can cast stuff a little bit more freely. Like if your opponent has a foil and then has the counter magic for the Unearth, like you're still probably okay with those exchanges, but I don't know. I like the fact that it can get you back sort of this toolbox of creatures. Like you have 6 creatures that'll just draw you a card instantly. You have 3 creatures that'll draw you a card eventually. You have 3 creatures that can deal with small creatures on the other side of the board. I just feel like some amount of Unearth here would be real good. I'm not saying a full play set, but like 1 to 2 feels like it might get you a little bit of extra kick in your step. Anything else that you'd consider playing in here? Do you think Death Denied is passé at this point?
Yeah, I don't think we're on that plan anymore.
Trying to think of anything else that we could possibly jam in here. Pestilence.
So I see what you're saying. I don't think Pestilence is good anymore either. The reason I don't think it's good is because I think that the decks that it was good against was really like blue-red, because there's so many X1s. In the new meta, you tap out for Pestilence and then it gets foiled, and then it wasn't even that good to begin with against Delver, Augur of Bolas, and Grimog Angler. However, I could see it being a sideboard card for the Boros matchup. What do you think? No Crypt Rats either.
I mean, yeah, there's no Crypt Rats, and I guess if we want to say maybe go to the Unearth plan, I like Crypt Rats more.
Yeah, same, because then we can unearth our Crypt Rats. It's interesting that a lot of these decks, like older plays like that, have just been cut. really, it looks to me to be in favor of Deemer Guildmage and extra removal.
Oh, here's actually an interesting one that we didn't talk about with creatures. Okiba Gang Shinobi. Now, yes, the two big decks in the format are currently running some level of graveyard interaction, but the ability to rebuy your ETBs. And
Okiba Gang Shinobi is in the sideboard, which I think is where it should be. It's a 3/2. It's pretty expensive, and it's really only good against control decks.
I guess that's fair. All right, other things that we could maybe consider.
Well, let's talk about the mana base a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Because the mana base for this deck is actually pretty big for Pauper. 4 Barren Moors, the cycle for a B land enters the battlefield tapped as well. 2 Bojuka Bogs. When you're in mono black, you can just run Bojuka Bog. It's okay that it comes into play tapped, and it's so incidentally good sometimes. And then here's where it starts getting interesting. 3 copies of Deemer Aqueduct, which look to be the only source of blue mana in the deck.
Yep.
So that's how you're going to be drawing a card sometimes with Deemer Guildmage. It looks like the plan for this list is really to go more on the discard route. 2 copies Radiant Fountain if you're playing Deemer Aqueduct. It feels like sort of a free roll. And then 12 Swamps.
So no ETB tapped lands, like the either gates or gain lands or the cycle of ETB tapped duels.
Well, I see what you're saying, but 9 of these come into play tapped.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm
specifically. But you mean the life gain lands?
Yeah, I'm saying life gain lands or gates or any of those. Just
I think there's an argument for not playing Deemer Aqueduct or Radiant Fountain and just playing 4 of the blue black land, or 5 even. You could play a Deemer Guildgate, 5 of the tap single mana lands instead. What do you think?
I think I'm okay with the idea of cutting Radiant Fountain, just because this is a deck. Like if you just look at the mana costs here, there's a lot of double blacks here, and
yeah, and Radiant Fountain makes that kind of tough. Radiant Fountain also de-incentivizes you from playing Crypt Rats and Pestilence as well.
That's true. Like it does definitely de-incentivize certain play patterns, and like a small minority of the time, like you're going to be a little bit mana screwed because of it, and it's going to put you in a tight position where you play awkwardly. That said, I do like the Aqueducts here, and my entire pitch on this is mono black has always been mana greedy. And I think being able to keep a hand with a little bit more action and 1 less land and still having access to the same amount of mana is a huge boon for this type of like mid-rangey control deck.
Yeah.
So I really like the Aqueducts. Not a fan of the Radiant Fountains. And I'm curious if this was kind of a hedge. Last week we saw, or the week before, we saw a ton of Burn do really well. I'm wondering if this is more a hedge for that rather than like saying like, no, Radiant Fountain's fine, I don't need more blue. That said, this is what? 23 lands, and out of those, 9 of them come in tapped.
But the deck has like no turn 1 plays.
It has no turn 1 plays, but that's
most of its good
a
plays
lot
are
of tapped lands.
Most of its good plays don't happen until turn 3, so I'm okay with it.
All right. And as you mentioned, like Bojuka Bog, kind of a free roll. You don't really have to put in a lot of effort with that one. And then looking
right, and it's just like I said, it's just incidentally good against enough stuff.
So I guess one of the interesting things I want to talk about here is, do you think that these decks should have been playing bounce lands earlier? Like, think about the fact that they've always been mana greedy. Think about the fact that they've always had, like, cycling lands. They've usually had some amount of Bojuka Bogs. You could even run, like, Mortuary Mire or one of the other black utility lands. And even if the bounce land is just functionally black and a colorless, has this always been something that could have been done and perhaps should have been done?
No, I don't think so. These decks also used to play Corrupt also, so I think having, or Tendrils of Corruption, so I think having a high actual swamp count was very important.
Oh, that's true. That is one of the big things you lose out on in this deck. Like, Tendrils is a pretty reasonable removal spell that kind of sets you up to be stabilize a little bit.
Right, but now that we're talking about it a bunch, I'm like, how did this deck fit all these cards in it? You know, and we're talking about a lot of cards that just like aren't in here, and it's like, how did they ever fit all that stuff?
Well, I think the big thing was like mono black always had a pretty decent range in terms of the actual configurations. So this is one permutation of this idea, and I could maybe see different versions of this showing up in the future. And I guess the question is like, this is
excuse me.
This is like the lightest of blue splashes. Would you consider going like, can this deck go deeper on its blue splash, and should it?
Oh, what would you propose it plays as in addition to these? I think that Demir Guildmage has the luxury of being hybrid, so you don't really need to splash too much blue. I think when you start splashing blue, you start diluting the deck a little too much. But since this isn't really a splash, it's more a splash for the ability that also is mana you're already making anyway, like black mana. I think it's fine. I would be very wary of putting additional blue cards in this list.
I'm kind of thinking. I think it's just an interesting thought to kind of pursue for me, because I'm wondering if a blue-black control list, because we've had this very sort of fixed idea of what blue-black control looks like for so many years, with the fact that Teachings was a deck for ages.
Right.
I'm wondering, I don't know what else you'd put in here, because the big thing is you don't want to weaken Gray Merchant if that's going to be your finisher. And you also don't just want to play Alchemy, which I have a feeling is where this goes if we continue down this line. It's just something I'm interested in terms of what else could be slotted in here that black doesn't have access to, but blue does. Just thoughts.
So we have card draw. I mean, is maybe Soul Manipulation as a counterspell, but we have removal, so I don't think we really need that.
I mean, it's also a Raise Dead.
Sure.
All right. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in blue that I could potentially make an argument for here, because I can't really make one for Agony Warp. That one's a hard sell in my mind. Like the only other thing I could think of splashing blue for is something like Una's Grace, which is just another copy of Dimir Guildmage, and then you should just play Unearth, because if you hit one, you can buy it back. Let's move into the sideboard, and we can kind of continue this conversation. So 1 extra copy of Disfigure in the sideboard, 4 copies of Duress, black mana for a sorcery. Look at a target opponent's hand. Take a non-land, non-creature from it, and they discard it. The final copy of Combage Witches is hiding in the board. 4 copies of Choking Sands. 1 black, destroy target non-swamp land. If it was a non-basic land, its controller loses 2 life. 1 more copy of Oubliette. 4 copies of Serrated Arrows, which is
nice.
Yeah, this has to be the tribe hedge, right? I can't think of another reason.
So hold on. Yes, but yeah, I guess because Serrated Arrows is good against their counter spells. Because I was thinking, like, you know, the problem with Tribe is that it's really good against damage-based removal, but we already have Snuff Out and stuff like that also. So, but it must be there for Tribe. I can't think of what else it would be in here for.
I mean, yeah, like there's Snuff Out there. You also already have like Disfigure. You can go up to 3 of them, or you can go up to full 4 of them post board. And there's lots of cheap interaction, but I do think it is just the fact that if it doesn't get countered on the way down, they don't have good ways to deal with it. For folks at home, this is a artifact for 4. It comes in with 3 arrowhead counters on it. You can tap it and remove an arrowhead counter from it to put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. And then when it has no arrowhead counters on it, sacrifice it at the beginning of the beginning of your next upkeep, I think. It's a weird card.
It's a lot. It's confusing.
Then we have 1 extra copy of Snuff Out in the sideboard, 1 extra copy of Thorn of the Black Rose, and then 1 copy of Akiba Gang Shinobi, which I briefly mentioned earlier. It's 3 black for a 3/2. When it deals damage to an opponent, that opponent discards 2 cards. and it also has ninjutsu. So if you are attacking with an unblocked creature, you can pay its ninjutsu cost, in this case 3 and a black, and you put it into play attacking that player. Okay. Anything else you'd like to see in this board? Is duress really our call here, or do we want to be like a wrench mine deck? Do we want to be a distress deck? Do we want to be a divest deck?
Wow, Mike, you just named like literally all of them.
I did.
I think it's really going to depend on what you expect to face. Duress is probably fine if you're thinking about if you're going to go against a lot of other control decks. Probably fine against blue-black as well, just blue-black Angler Delver, because you can duress like a foil out of their hand and maybe clear the way for a good spell. Sort of taking the force of will type angle there. Duress is good against decks like Tron. It's good against decks like Burn, which maybe this deck is a little bit slow to face. So I think Duress is a fine choice, given some of the weaknesses that this deck is looking to overcome. A 1-mana answer to a bunch of problematic spells is just fine.
Okay. And then, I guess another one of my questions is Choking Sands. Do we really... Is this deck really beating Tron off of 4 3-mana land destruction spells?
So Choking Sands is not only good against Tron, it's also good against other decks that are looking to play the bounce lands. But I agree with you. I think that trying to beat Tron at the mana game is really, really, really difficult. So I'm more of the school of take your lumps. You're not going to beat Tron very easily anyway. Maybe between 4 Choking Sands and 4 Duresses you could, but it's still going to be a really, really tough uphill battle.
Yeah, it feels a little weird, and I know that it is a mainstay of mono black decks over the years, but it feels really odd to me to be relying on something like this as your big secret tech for specific matchups. I'm just not a fan, man. I guess
I agree. I was trying to find the silver lining.
I guess one of the other things that's kind of interesting here is in addition to not having any of the wrath effects, I'm also not seeing any copies of shrivel effects.
Well, I guess I could explain that away with the disfigures, the echoing decays, and the Kumbaj witches, which might be a little bit easier since they're all in the main deck, so you don't have to dedicate a sideboard slot to beating cards that you can already beat in your main deck. But that's just my go-to thought.
Okay, I see where you're coming from. I just against like as you even brought this up. You said that witches is a little slow against decks that spam tokens. So it just feels weird. I guess elves really hasn't been putting up the numbers lately. Maybe my issue here is that I'm just thinking about this as like mono black in the era where mono black was really good.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into some weird spice, because I've got one for you, and this one may not be played for a different reason, because I don't know how it's actually working on Mitgo right now. Are you familiar with the card Spinning Darkness?
Yeah. Lay it on me, though.
Oh, man. 4 black, instant. Spinning Darkness deals 3 damage to target non-black creature, gain 3 life. And then you may remove the top 3 black cards of your graveyard from the game instead of playing Spinning Darkness's mana cost. Feelings on this thing?
Sounds good, Mike. What's the problem with it?
I don't know if it's bugged or not right now.
It's bugged.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. Spinning Darkness is a big problem.
What does it do right now?
Oh, I don't completely remember. Let me Google it. I just know that it's bugged, and everyone knows it's bugged.
I was gonna say, because I know in the past it has been bugged advantageously. It has been bugged detrimentally. Like I know for a while you could remove any 3 cards, not just the top 3 or the top 3 black cards either. I know for a while it wouldn't let you pay its alternate casting costs and made you hard cast it.
All right. Yeah, there's a bunch of problems with the card. But
how would you feel
in
about
a
this
vacuum,
though? Like, it's a free quote unquote removal spell.
in a vacuum, it's fine. This deck isn't playing Grimlock Angler, so it would be good.
Okay, yeah.
You wouldn't have to worry about.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
turning that off.
Competing for the resource of the graveyard.
Right.
All right. Let me just before we get way too far, we want to get a combat step in here. Just if nothing else, to refresh ourselves and our listeners. Adrian, are you ready for your question?
Yes.
All right. I've chosen what I believe to be your two least favorite forms of playing Magic the Gathering. And I'm asking you, got to pick one, limited or commander?
I pick limited.
Reasons?
Limited is not multiplayer.
Oh, really? You're not a fan of multiplayer?
No, play Magic 1v1 the way Richard Garfield intended.
Huh. All right. Interesting.
You cowards.
You can still play.
I don't like waiting 30 minutes for it to be my turn again.
I will agree, even as someone who plays Commander, like, games can drag for a little bit. I will fully admit to that, but okay. That's pretty fair. Even though limited's going to take you what, like a couple hours?
I mean, over the course of many tournaments, yes.
3 rounds.
Many games, I mean, sorry.
Okay. All right. What do you have for me for this combat step?
Elves or merfolk, Mike?
All right. So you've posed me a difficult question here, because I dislike elves, having had to play against them for like decades. I dislike merfolk because of the meme of it all.
What do you mean?
Merfolk isn't a good deck, y'all. Like, this is my PSA to you. It's not a good deck. I know that people who really like Merfolk really like that deck. It's not good right now. Just let it rest.
In what format is it not good, Mike?
Well, Adrian, riddle me this. Oh, it is good in standard right now, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't think so. But there's, legacy Merfolk. There's modern Merfolk. There's vintage Merfolk, technically.
All right, Adrian, I'm going to do something right here. I'm going to go to MTG Goldfish. I'm going to go to... Let's go with modern. Let's go with modern because it's got a good, wide player base. I'm going to put in...
Mike, you just had to say that you were talking about modern. I left it open to you. There's no need for you to get revenge on me.
No, now I'm curious. All right.
Lord of Atlantis Judge Prim is pretty sweet, though.
Oh, I think I've seen that. It does look sweet. I'm going to pick Merfolk on principle of I have built a decent amount of like backdated comedy equity on the fact that I do really hate elves. I do deeply enjoy certain players who play elves who are my friends, but it's a tolerance more than anything else. I don't know. I just don't like elves, man. I haven't liked that deck ever. Don't like it in Pauper. I guess I'm okay with it in Legacy because it's not super great there. It's not like tier 0. Don't like it in EDH. Don't like the thing you talked about, like 30 minute combo turns trying to figure out if they can kill us all. Yeah.
You cowards.
You heard it here first, folks. EDH is a format for cowards. All right, let's return to our discussion of this mono blacklist. I guess that my other question here is, we've seen in the past like the Rakdos takes on this list, and we have the presence of like a white-black pestilence list that kind of leans into some of the things that mono black established. Do you think there's further room for color experimentation within the quote mono black realm?
Sure. I think you can make the argument that the Rakdos control deck is kind of like a mono black deck, where it's focusing on denying opponents resources before it wins the game in a demonstrative fireball.
My only issue with that is that I feel like there is a subtle but present difference between the two of them. Like you're talking about like that black red like discard control kind of style, right?
Right.
I don't know. I feel like that interacts on a different level, on a different metric, because like that you get like incidental burn if you need it. And yes, like you can fireball someone out, but you do get access. I feel like those are less removal heavy and more burn heavy, and they do focus on trying to hate your opponent's hand out, so sort of preemptively dealing with threats. I don't know. It's just one of those gut feeling things, you know, like this blue black list, or quote unquote mono black, feels like mono black with one card added in and a very, very light splash in terms of the mana base.
But I'm talking about an actual 2-color deck now.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like this doesn't, and I can't like fully elaborate on it because I'm looking at one of these lists here. Like Chittering Rats and Liliana Spectre have been played. Like the creature base all tracks, and then you go into the fact that it's also running like main deck Duress and 2 Raven's Crime. It does get access to better removal, which is nice. Mm-hmm. In the form of Terminate. That's the big one. And you do get access to better sideboard cards. So, because that's always been one of the things that Mono Black has really struggled with, the fact that it doesn't line up well against certain card types, namely enchantments and artifacts, since it has no proper way to remove either one of them unless they also happen to be creatures.
Thankfully, those aren't really a big problem in Pauper. Enchantments, sure, maybe Journey to Nowhere, etc. But, you know, maybe your matchup against Affinity is a little bit worse, but it's really not a big deal in my opinion.
I mean, your matchup to Affinity is also worse just by nature of you're playing 4 Disfigure across your 75. Like, that, some of these removal spells don't line up well. Also, you don't really have a way to answer Fling combo or deal with a lot of the stuff that they sometimes try to do. All right. I mean, is there anything else left to talk about with this list? Like, and maybe the metagame as a whole and why this managed to have success? Because there's nothing about this deck that really strikes me as like sort of like a silver bullet.
The most interesting, well, that's Mono Black's thing, right? It just can grind you down. It has a lot of catch-all answers, and eventually it wins with Gary. Really, the only big innovation is the Demer Guild Mage.
Yeah, it's interesting to see an old friend return. But do you think this is a here to stay kind of thing, or do you think this is someone got spicy one week and this is the last we hear of it?
I think we'll see it floating around. I would be surprised if it managed to win again, just because I think that the numbers aren't really in its favor. But that's not to say that it won't. I think the deck, I don't think there's anything that really says it can't win, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't get, I don't think it gets preyed upon like super hard by the 2 top decks or anything.
Yeah. I think,
but I wouldn't expect to see it a whole bunch.
I think what I'm more interested in, because obviously the entire Pauper sphere has been abuzz for months about the idea of bans. How do you like this in like a post-Gush world?
I think it has even more problems.
Really?
I think that in the post-Gush but not post-Monarch world, a better Monarch deck will be able to beat this pretty handily most times.
Okay. Huh. I think maybe if you just tool this deck a little bit, like giving it ways to like handle some of the creatures that they play.
Well, you're right. You could run extra. God, why can't I think of the card? Extra, the -2/-2.
Disfigure.
No, the other one.
Oh, Echoing Decay.
Yes. You could just run more of those, and that will certainly help because that's good against 9 out of 10 other creatures. Really, it's not good against core Skyfish. You have ways to deal with that. So maybe I'm wrong. It just feels like because that deck is just going to be playing. Well, I don't know actually. Now that I talk about it. This deck also has a lot of removals. Like, which deck plays the better Monarch game is really the question. And I actually think their Monarch game is pretty comparable if you boosted up the numbers of Thorn of the Black Rose. The other deck has an advantage because it's in the air, but this deck has the advantage of more removal.
And it does, however, though, have the awkward side effect of, like, its removal doesn't go face.
Right. This deck has some built-in protection against that in the form of Gray Merchant, which will always be a bad trade for the Boros Monarch deck because it cannot straight up counter Gray Merchant.
That's true. Like, I guess that is interesting. Like, if you can hang on long enough for a Gray Merchant, that does feel pretty solid against.
Right.
Against,
and like the worst case scenario is they have to Galvanic Blast in response to its own trigger when it's the only creature on the board.
And yeah, like that. If that's the situation you find yourself in, you're not in a great situation as is. And actually, weirdly enough, like if it's the only thing, right? That's a 4-point life total difference, and they had to burn a Galvanic Blast on it. Like,
right. So I guess I take that back. I guess that it would be. I'd be interested to see how that plays out in a world where Monarch is suddenly just the only thing at the top. But that would be my main concern, is that if Gush goes without Monarch, Monarch is just the problem now.
Yeah. So if Gush and Monarch go, if that were the situation, I'd feel pretty okay with this. Like, this is just like a solid mid-rangey deck. And when formats get shaken up, like, either play mono red aggro or play like just a weird, like a solid mid-range deck that doesn't really care too much about what exactly your opponent's doing. I think either of those would be fine in a post-Gus, post-Monarch world. And since we're kind of rounding things out here, Magic Fest Los Angeles, I believe, is this upcoming weekend. I'm just going to check on that one. But, oh wow, Google even suggests that I put the word pauper at the end of that. It is Friday, March 1st. So that is not the end of this week, but the end of next week. Magic Fest Los Angeles is happening. It'll be the first large-scale pauper event that is Wizards sanctioned. This is a Mythic Championship qualifier, so doing well enough in this, you get to go to a Mythic Championship, formerly the Pro Tour. So it'll be interesting to see what shakes out from that, and hopefully we can get a bunch of lists from it and see what was doing well at this event.
Yeah, we're certainly not going to get any coverage, so lists are about the best we can hope for.
Let's not kick that hornet's nest of coverage.
All right.
All right. Do you have anything else for the fine folks at home tonight, Adrian, or would you like to take us out of the show?
You're all beautiful. I'll take us out of the show. Thanks for supporting us today. This podcast is brought to us by our patrons, including Nick Marine Bro. Please consider supporting us if you like the show. Check for this video description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you of listening to this on a platform with reviews. They're always appreciated as they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, you can contact us either via our website or you can email us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to my LGS Pat's Games, Mike's LGS JP Comics, and of course L. You can find our theme song Quantitative and other great tracks over at soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.